Good morning, good afternoon, welcome. Give everyone a second to connect to audio. We are expecting a few more people, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Contracts Services Procurement Training. My name is Joey, and I'll be helping out with just the technical aspects of today. So if you're having any technical issues, Zoom issues, feel free to message me. We can figure anything out. It's usually an easy fix. If you have any questions during the training at all, please feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Christine will be in the chat, so she'll see what you post in there. Also, feel free to unmute yourself. If you have a question, I'm sure somebody else has the same question. And this training is being recorded. Closed captioning is available. Just let me know if you want that. And I believe that's it for me. I'll turn it over to Christine to get started.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Christine Dennis. Know quite a few people in here, so that should be fun. I am here to basically assist you with procurement for this contract. If you are receiving grant funds, there are very specific requirements you have to follow when you are making a purchase where price is a factor, but not the only factor. Most of those type procurements are going to be services, professional services. And it makes sense when you think about it, because do you want the cheapest attorney, or do you want the most experienced attorney you can afford? And very rarely do you want the cheapest. You're here because you have in your grant a request for some type of contract services. Do you mind telling me what you're doing, either in chat or unmute? What kind of services you're planning to procure? Anybody doing legal? So we're getting a lot of people coming in still. Okay, so you're procuring to help with domestic violence. Are you doing the legal, Catherine, or are you doing counseling? Are you doing a combination of the two? Kind of a court combo? Okay, yeah, that's pretty standard. So you need an attorney to help out with just basically walking them through the legal process. Right. And then you're also bringing in a counselor to assist with basically everything else that goes along with that. Yeah, if needed. Very good. Anybody doing anything different than that? Because that's usually the standard here on this grant. Looks like no. Okay. The rules that we're using come from 2 CFR 200, also known as super circular. We're talking about this as a combination with a small purchase plus additional services. Okay, your translation, interpretation, exterior building, cleaning and painting. Okay. Ooh, translator interpretation. Interesting. That's going to have a very specific scope of work then. Have you already developed that, or are you still working on that? Okay, you've got a relationship with the local nonprofit. That's good. Okay. Hey, it'll work. What we're going to do is figure out what's the best way to document this and move forward so that everything goes smoothly. You are required to do an RFP, competitive proposal, for anything over 250,000. You are being asked to do it here with the small purchase less than 250,000 to basically document, we have taken all the required steps to engage the person or company who is best able to provide what we need. Okay. The main difference here between what you have to do with the small purchase versus what you would have to do if you were doing the over 250 is public advertising. You are not required to do that when you do the small purchase competitive. Okay. You can if you want to. You can always do more, but you are not required to. Okay. You have to have at least 2 responsible vendors who are willing and able to compete. What is responsive? Responsive means that they've submitted everything on time and everything that you needed was submitted. Okay. Responsible means that they are willing and able to complete the work you need on time within budget. The only requirement under the regs to show a vendor is responsible is verification of sam.gov. Is there anybody who is not familiar with sam.gov? And if you're not, it's fine. A lot of people are not. Okay, it looks like everybody's familiar. All you have to do is go in there and prove that the person you are going to contract with is not debarred or suspended. The reason for that is if you are debarred or suspended, grant money cannot be used to pay you. It's automatically disallowed. If you get into the debarred or suspended list, you've done something bad wrong. Okay. It's a pattern of behavior. It's not one time didn't work out great. One of the things you really need to look at is get references for anybody you are considering, because with a service-based contract, you want to know, did they perform on time? Did they perform as promised? Would you use them again? If the answer to any of those is no, are they necessarily the best vendor for you? And that's your choice. That makes sense so far? We're just kind of doing the overview walkthrough. We're going to go through the paperwork packet that you'll be expected to submit here in a minute. Okay, so the first thing you've got to do, and this is true with any procurement, develop your scope of work. What is it we want? In the cases that we've talked about, attorney, counseling, translators, first thing I want to know, do you have experience doing this? How are you going to set up your scope of work? Basically, what's our perfect candidate? So let's say I'm going to use legal because most of you are probably doing that. And I'm going to start typing in chat. That may make it easier for everybody to see. So for legal, scope of work. Okay, first they have to be licensed in the state. They have to be licensed and they should have experience. Are you going to be working mostly in tribal court? Are you going to be in federal court? Are you going to be in state court? Okay, so you would want somebody who's comfortable working in your tribal court. Experience with the type of cases. Let's assume protective orders. Any what other types of cases would your attorneys be trying or assisting with? I mean, I'm assuming we're obviously doing protective orders, custody issues. Maybe foster care. What else do y'all have? Is anybody doing like elder service? Because there are a lot of really different pieces involved there since you're dealing with legal adults, not necessarily juveniles. Okay, we want to look at price. Can we afford them? Is the price over the DOJ limit? Does everybody know that there is a DOJ limit? I want to say it's $81.25 an hour. Is every attorney that you look at going to be more than $81.25 an hour? Yeah. Is that a problem? No. You just have to get prior approval. And we're going to talk about the documentation you need there. Usually that's the biggest piece of the contract services puzzle is we're going to exceed the DOJ limit. What do we have to do to document why? Are you going to contract based on a flat rate? Are you going to contract on an hourly rate? How are you going to do this? Is anybody doing a flat rate contract? We're going to pay you $20,000 total. Is anybody doing anything like that? Or are you looking at an hourly rate? You're doing a flat rate, so you are going out with the contract of not to exceed, let's say $20,000. Okay. Okay, so they're bidding that. Okay, you're doing a flat rate contract for code amendments, SA. What's SA? Oh, sexual assault, probably. Okay, good. So what are you going to look for when you're talking about finding somebody to do your code amendments? What are the things you'll look for in your request for proposal? Experience. Yeah, absolutely. Do you want somebody who's never done this before? No, you don't want to train them. You want them to come in with the ability to write this code for you and to make sure that it can be enforced. How will you know? By checking their checking references, checking their background, looking at what types of work have they done in the past. Person started amendments on a previous OVC grant but did not complete as the grant ended. Figures. Were they engaged on an hourly basis or were they engaged on a project flat rate basis? A reminder, you guys are hourly as an employee. Yeah, that's going to happen. Already happened. Yeah, well, we're moving on from it. And just a reminder, if you don't want to type, you're welcome to unmute and discuss. So do you have a couple of people in mind? Yeah, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. That's just it. We're not asking you to reinvent the entire process. All we're asking you to do, because you're using grant funds, we have to document that you have followed the requirements for procuring contract services. All we're looking at. Yeah, you want to get it done, you want it to be done right, and it needs to be enforceable. Okay, so we're going to, after we've developed our scope of work, we're going to look at that and say, okay, what do we want to include in judging this contract? Okay. Preferences are required. Okay, Indian preference has to be included. Other preferences need to be included. Small minority, women-owned businesses count as other preferences. How many of you have tribal preference? Yeah, most people do, and that's fine. You need to account for that. Some tribes have preference for veteran-owned companies. You may have other types of preference. That's fine. You just have to make sure that those are included in the RFP. The reason the RFP matters so much is you have to put this out to your bidders. And then this is how you are going to judge everybody when you receive their bids. We're going to award the contract to the person who scores the highest, period. Okay. You are required to include all scoring factors up front. You can't say later, oh, we're going to add this too. Everybody has to be bidding off the same information for it to be fair. In this case, we set it up where pricing was lower than experience. Can you do that? Absolutely. A lot of people on RFPs have price and experience roughly the same. You don't have to, you just have to include both. Does that make sense? Okay. If price is the only factor, are we going to do this type of procurement? And the answer is no. We're going to do a regular small purchase procurement. We're going to get 3 quotes or so. Whoever has the lowest price after preference applied gets the contract. That's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Here we have to look at a lot of other factors. Okay, you need to include the submission date. We don't do a public bid opening. We're not required to, but we don't want anybody straggling in long after the fact. Okay. Publicly advertised, not required. That's up to you. If your standard is you put everything over, 25,000 out for public advertisement, that's fine. Follow your policy. Got to have a basis for your price estimates. Okay. Before you start this, as you are developing your scope of work, you should have an idea of how much it's going to cost you. How do you get that information? Do you just know? Where do you get your pricing information? Internet research, that's one way. Past experience, Google, yep, y'all just nailed those. Yeah, research, ask the questions, ask, other tribes in the area. Look at what you've paid for similar services in the past. We're looking for a ballpark. Why do we need that ballpark price estimate before we even go out for bid? Other than because, 2 CFR 200 says we have to. What's the other reason? Oh, that's good. Interview coalitions who perform or have performed a similar service. Yeah, talk to them. Make friends. Y'all are not competing with each other. There's no good reason not to help other tribes, other coalitions in the area.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Do I? Andrew, did you mean to talk?
No, sorry.
That's okay. Okay, you did research beforehand, so you'd know what to ask for in the proposed budget. Again, why? 2 reasons. Number 1, can we afford it in the first place? Number 2, how are you going to judge the bid responses if you don't have a clue what it should cost? They're not dictating it to you. You start the process by knowing here's the range we can expect to pay. Can we afford it or not? Assuming the answer is yes, we can. Now, when we go out for bid, we have a basis to judge whether the price being proposed is reasonable or not. Does it 100% have to be the low bidder here? No. Does the price have to be reasonable? Yes, it does. Make sense? And not just high, but low as well. Are you going to hire an attorney that says they'll charge you $5 an hour? I'm definitely going to ask a lot of questions before doing that. Okay, make sense? We just talked about the reasonableness. How many bids are you required to have in based on your policy? The regulatory definition is at least 2 responsible bidders willing and able to compete. How many of you have 3 as the flat number in your procurement policy? Three if it's over 5,000. Oh, Roxanne, that's going to work out great for you. Okay, so yeah, that's going to make your life easier for sure. Okay, so Joe's tribe requires you to have 3 quotes, 3 bids if it's more than 5,000. Is that okay? Mhm. Yeah, most people do. I think the 3 came in because you have to have at least 2, so most people said, fine, 3 it is. Nowhere in the regs does it say 3. I don't care. Follow your policy. What if you only get 1? What happens? Because it happens. We went out, we got 1. Now what? Well, you're going to find out because it does happen. And it happens, it may happen a lot depending on where you are and the type of services you're looking for. The first thing you're going to have to do is document what you did to get at least 3 bids. You will have to have it approved to sole source. And we'll talk about the information you should have to support that. The main thing that you're going to have is proof A, that you tried to get competition, B, that you have not set it up to where it's restricted, too restricted. Like we talked about experience, 10, 15 years experience is pretty reasonable. If you come in with 23 years of experience in your RFP, there's going to be questions because that looks like an attempt to restrict. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, basically what we're looking for is, and this is true of all grant funding, we want to be sure that the competition was fair, that there was competition, that you did not go in there saying, here's who we're going to hire, so now let's write the bid to where they're the only ones who qualify. I know none of you would ever do such a thing, but it does happen. Okay, you have to have a method to evaluate the proposal. If you're requesting sole source, you better have an evaluation of the proposal showing that they are willing and able to complete whatever the project is. So Roxanne, for you, do they have the skills, knowledge, and experience to write your code? the answer to is no, then we're going to have to do something else. That doesn't usually happen, but in theory it could. Okay, don't know why that just turned purple, probably because I touched it. Okay, here's the final procurement, but I want to go, we're going to cut back down here. So here's our basic RFP. Tribe has a blended code.
Hey, Christine,
Yeah.
I don't think we're seeing the
Yes.
RFP.
Huh?
Or we're not seeing the RFP,
Why not? What are you
know.
seeing?
The agenda.
Why won't it let you see the RFP? Let's try
Hmm.
something else. Do you see an RFP now?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, good. See, that's why Joey's here. One of many reasons, because I can't run this stuff by myself. I can't be trusted. Okay, so here's a basic RFP. We need contract legal services to assist in providing legal advice for the micro grant. The services are expected to include providing participant advice, reviewing contracts, other services as needed during the period. Here's how we are going to score your proposal. What's the other thing you're telling them as you're setting this up? When I get an RFP, this tells me what specifically I need to include in my response. You don't care about, anything other than what's my direct experience here? What's the price? Indian preference or no? Other preferences or no? And do I have references? Can I document that I'm capable of doing this? Why is this important? Number one, it's going to make your review process easier. You've told them, here's what I need to look at. Don't give me a bunch of garbage filler. I don't care about what clubs you were in college, okay? Just tell me what you do here. Here's who we are going to send the response to. Here's the due date. Is this an adequate scope of work? No, do not put your budgeted price on the RFP. I was getting ready to go to that. Why not? Because that's confidential information. If you tell them the budget, what is everybody going to come in at? Right below that budget. They need to come up with their own independent price. Okay, you want more detailed on the services. What do you want? I'm not saying you're wrong. This was my generic attempt to write a scope of work. What would you add to it, Catherine? First, Joe, did I answer that to where it makes sense? Okay. What detail would you add, Catherine? And you can unmute and answer if you want. That's easier. When I look at the scope of work, it's pretty general. These are the things I know we're going to need. If I know additional information, I should definitely include it. For advice, you'd break it down to the type of participants that they would be dealing with. I think that's very reasonable. You know, if you know that you're going to do everything through tribal courts, you would probably want to include something about that in there as well. You put as much info as you have. When you're starting a program, you just may not have that much information. So what you're trying to do is get the basics covered, and that's fine. Do what you know, put as much out as you know, and then if you get down the road and you discover you need something more specific, you can always do another RFP. Does that make sense? Yeah, Catherine, I 100% agree with that. Hey, Roxanne, you got a question?
Yeah, I do. Actually, our situation is different. We're an off-reservation tribal 638 program. It's an OBGYN
Yes.
clinic, and we've just recently begun sexual assault forensic exams. So the piece here is we have quasi-jurisdictional issues. So if we have, we deal with all the tribes in the Great Plains, all over the country, they come to our clinic. So if we have a person that has a sexual assault on Pine Ridge, occurred there, and then they come here to our clinic and do the exam, then we've developed the chain of custody and all of that type of thing. So we're just updating that code to recognize that. So that piece of information would be in that request for.
Yes, 100%.
So they know that the legalities of how that code is going to be developed. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a great point. You know that you're going to have these issues because of how you're set up. You're set up to assist more than just a tribe. You're assisting across a coalition, which, yeah, you're going to have rules that are going to go across the board. And I think that's absolutely, you would need to spell that out. Yeah, completely support that. However much information you have needs to be included in your scope and in the RFP. The more information I have, the better I'm able to tailor my response as a potential contractor. At the same time, I can look at it and go, this is outside of my wheelhouse and I'm not going to waste your time. Make sense? And just for future reference, anytime you've got questions when you're developing scope of work or all of this going, is this adequate or not? Feel free to call me or call your grants person and we'll help you work it out. That's what we're here for. It's literally the only reason I have any association with this is to help you guys address any issues that come up. So it's never a bother. Okay, any other questions on this? I think you guys are doing a real good job thinking out specifics as to what you need to include. What's going to give you the best possible response. One thing I want to point out here is that we spelled out specifically, here's how we're going to score. Up to 30 points, up to 30 points. So we set price and experience the same. Is that okay? Sure. Indian preference, you're either going to get the points or you're not. There's no sliding scale here. You can't have kind of Indian preference. It's a yes or it's a no. Same with tribal preference, yes or no. References provided up to 20 points. You can judge that. Again, how do you want to assess? On the experience, let's say you get 3 responses. You may have a system that says the best experience gets 30 points, the next best gets 20, the third best gets 10. Price, best price is 30, next best price is 20, worst price, most expensive, lowest, most off the are expected gets 10. I've seen some people set up references where they give you points per reference provided. Questions on that? There are a lot of ways to do the scoring. As long as you are consistent in scoring across the entire proposal, it's okay. Okay, questions on that? We're good? If we're not good, I expect you to stop me and say so. Okay. So here's a bid form that we may choose to use. This is helping us right away determine what kind of information do we need. Is the bid for goods or services? It's for services with price as a factor, not the only factor. If it's goods, it's going to be a different procurement. It's going to be your standard, straightforward, small purchase, boom, we're done. Description of the services, scope of work, rationale for purchase. We're going to attach the scope of work here. How are we going to determine what factors matter? Price, experience, Indian preference, references. Can you back up what you're telling me? Pretty basic. We chose not to publicly advertise because we don't have to. Who did we talk to? Was in who responded? Susie's attorneys. Received the 29th. Yes, they get Indian preference. No, they do not get tribal preference. Does not get additional preferences. Small minority, women-owned business. Proposal score is 60. Okay. Do we need any other information to judge this or to document? No. We've identified everything that we've looked at here. Proposed rates 90 an hour. Does this exceed the OJP threshold? And the answer is yes. Please provide a brief explanation of why this cost is justified, and we'll get to that. So here's how they're scored. Best price, middle of the road experience. That's what we know from looking at this, correct? Do you have any questions on this one before we look at the next one? Okay. See who's next. Okay, notice that everything, the first stuff is all the same. All of this part is going to be exactly the same. Okay, we've got random legal. They do not receive Indian preference. Do not receive tribal preference, do not receive any preference. Proposal score is 70. Okay. 150 an hour. Whoa. Okay. Experience, they got 30. They know what they're doing. Their price is fine. It's not great, but it's basically okay. We've established that these are the local rates and the amount is reasonable. How would we get that information? Could be the Bar Association. Google is a wealth of information. There are several employment agencies, hiring companies that have average costs that you can find online that are area specific. You could look at what are you paying for legal services elsewhere within the tribe. Is this reasonable? Why do we have this here, but we didn't have it up here with Miss Susie? Sorry, don't get dizzy. Why didn't we fill anything in here? But we did down here for Ranton. What's the reason? Could we have used the same response that we've got here? Local rates, amounts reasonable on Susie? Yeah, we could. Why did we not? Yeah, we may have specialized attorneys. And that's absolutely going to have an impact on rates. The other thing is Susie didn't score high enough to even be in the running. Okay, we know that. She's got a great price. She doesn't have the experience. Even with Indian preference, she's not in the running. Make sense? I'm only going to justify rates for somebody that we want to hire. Can you do it for every single one you evaluate? Sure. I'm lazy though. Okay, so here we are again. Who are we talking to this time? Bubba's Law. Yeah, Cat says hi. He has opinions too. Okay, no preferences, 60 points. Didn't do any justification here because we're not hiring him either, so we don't really care. Okay, makes sense? So now we have 3 proposals that have been evaluated. Let's go let's document our decision. We already know who we're going to hire, correct? And this is in the materials that you have, just FYI. Here's our quote acceptance. Who did we get quotes from? What was their total score? Random Legal was outside the OJP threshold, which means we are going to have to request approval. Not a big deal. Okay, it's just part of it. Questions on this? You will submit the packet of information you have here to your grants person before you sign the contract and get the authorization for the rate. I know, Matt, are you still in here? Or Caitlin, either one? I don't think we've had any issues getting rates approved.
I don't think
Not
we've had
that
any
I'm aware.
issues.
Do what?
I don't think we've had any issues now.
Yeah, I can't think of any issues that we've had getting the rate approved. Has to go through the process, but it should be a pretty low drama situation. If anybody comes back with questions, it's because there's some information missing. Okay. Why do we want to have this quote acceptance form? Because it summarizes everything we did. When your auditors come in, it just got real simple for you to show them, here's how we did the procurement. Here's our summary sheet. What more do you people want? I'm an ex-auditor. I can talk like that. Okay, now let's go to our paperwork summary. How many of you use a procurement checklist? Really encourage the use of a procurement checklist depending on the method of procurement used, because there are a lot of documentation requirements in the regs. Even before you get to what you have in your own policy, 2 CFR 200 has a bunch of requirements in there. Okay. We did a small purchase. We used competitive proposal, but some of those requirements, which we're detailing down here, we're getting legal services, got 3 quotes. Did we document who we selected? Yep. Did we document who was rejected? Yeah, we did. If you reject a vendor that was the high scorer, you better have documentation attached to explain why. Could that happen? Could you reject the highest score? Sure. What are some appropriate reasons that you would reject the highest scorer? Because we already said up front that the high score gets the contract. Ooh, conflict of interest. Did not think about that. Could you reject them for that? Possibly. Yeah, if there was nobody else who could Do the selection, award, or administration of the contract? Yeah. If you later discovered that there had been an issue with their budgeting, that they had, additional information nobody else had, absolutely. Based on past performance issues. Oh, yeah. They look really good on paper, but we've worked with them before. And because we did the appropriate contract administration work within the tribe, verifying that, once the contract was signed, they actually followed everything. If they didn't, you don't have to work with them again. What's another reason that you might reject? Can't afford it. We looked at this. We cannot afford the high score. Or we couldn't get the high scorers rate approved because it was not reasonable and we couldn't justify it. Does that happen? Not often, but it could. Yeah, anything that you're doing that looks outside the norm needs to be documented. Yeah, if they're debarred, they shouldn't have gotten this far in the first place. If I get in, am I saying that could be, yeah, you could get down to it. Okay, we're ready to contract. We check the debarred list and they're on there. Yeah, absolutely. We're not hiring them. That happens. At the time they bid, this was what they were willing to do. When we get to the point where we're ready to contract, they're no longer willing to abide by those terms and conditions. Does that happen? Yeah. Sometimes they get a better offer from somebody else and they're going to be spread too thin. It's not pretty, but it does happen. Yeah, if they show up on your list of abusers, you can definitely skip right over them. Yeah, in fact, I'd encourage you to get a big red rejected stamp and hit them with it. Okay, this is the basic procurement information you need to do services. Tell me what questions you have. In your list of materials, you should have a fillable form for each of these areas where you can just punch, just click it, fill it, save it, submit it. I wanted to walk you through what a completed form should look like because that seems to be a little bit more helpful than just talking about the blanks here. So what questions have you got? Do you feel prepared to do this? If you weren't before, do you feel more prepared now? Okay, there's my email address. You are welcome to reach out to me directly. You are also welcome to work through your grant person. Are all the documents on the checklist attached? They better be. If they are not, email me and I will make sure you get them. Or reach out to your grant person. They've got access to all of this as well. You are very welcome. Yeah, I'm real interested in seeing how your procurement works out on the code. I think that's going to be very interesting. I look forward to seeing how all of those pieces come together. Okay, did we discuss enough what to do if you only have one response? Because a lot of times for specific, yeah, for sole source, there's a lot. And as narrow as your scope of work is, Roxanne, just because you've got it that defined, odds are pretty good you're going to wind up doing a sole source. Have we discussed adequate documentation for you to do that? Okay. What about anybody else? Do you guys feel comfortable? You know, mainly you have to document to do a sole source. We've gone out for bid. We couldn't find anybody else, or it's an emergency, which is not going to apply here. It's been approved, or they're literally the only ones providing that service. Again, there's nothing wrong with doing a sole source as long as you document you tried to do it through competition. Sometimes there's just not anybody else available. Okay, does anybody have any questions about any of this? You want to get out early or you want to hang out a while? I suspect you're probably ready to get out early since looking at locations, a lot of you it's straight up lunchtime. Tribe's going to conduct the bid and the selection. That's fine. As long as the documentation is there, that's completely fine. How do you get a form for the sole source? Tell me to send it to you and I will. There's a checklist very similar to this one that we use to sole source. And yeah, I'm happy to send that. Yeah, we'll get these sent out. Joey, you've got everybody's info, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay, we'll get this out to you. We're excited. And again, we're here to assist in any way possible with grant operations. So anything that's going to fall under 2 CFR 200, we are more than happy to provide any training, any assistance you all need, including policy development. So feel free to reach out on any of it. That's why we're here. Oh, Audrey, trust me, I've got your email address. Okay. Local resources were unavailable. Ouch. Oh, I am so glad that this is going to help you all. It's a really great program. And again, the way this one was set up is to provide as much across the board grant assistance as we can, helping develop that capacity. So yeah, any questions you've got, please reach out. All right, if you're finished talking to us, feel free to go and have a good day. I'm gonna stick around for a few minutes to discuss some of these other issues. Oh yeah, it's crazy. I'm so glad you all are available to do this. Hey, thank you all. And seriously, reach out to me, reach out to your grant person if you've got any questions. Yeah, if you can't get the reporting out there, if people don't feel comfortable reporting, nothing's gonna change. Got to have that reporting factor, and I'm so glad that these programs are available to assist victims. We can't fix it if we don't know about it. Thank you, Roxanne. Hopefully we'll make some progress here. But yeah, reach out if you guys have anything. We are always glad to help. All right, you guys have a good afternoon. If you've got questions when you get the sole source form, shoot me an email. Be glad to help. Joey, I will send that to you as quick as we finish up here.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thank you.
All right. Should we close out or you guys stick around?
I'm gonna hang out for just a couple of minutes, make sure everybody's got their questions.
Okay, sounds
answered.
good.
Okay, well, they do, because it's just Caitlin and Matt now, so.
All right, cool. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you,
All
Christine.
right, thank you.